Happy New Year's, everybody. It's Max from the Nerd Desk, and have you ever found Batman's philosophy to be a bit flawed? The whole no-killing thing seemed a bit counterintuitive. If so, you wouldn't be the first, because today, we're talking about somebody who saw all the holes in Batman's morality and decided to make some changes. Someone who can make a solid argument against the Dark Knight. I'm talking, of course, about the titular villain from the Batman story, Under the Red Hood. We're doing another Batman comparison today, everybody. Try to keep count of how many times I say Batman in this video. Anyways, Under the Red Hood is a story that's very similar to things I've already covered, like Flashpoint and The Dark Knight Returns, where both the book and the movie are highly revered by DC fans in their respective categories. If you were inclined to look online, you'd find plenty of clips of Batman's monologue about his killing rule, or edits of the Red Hood, who, despite being a pretty recent addition to DC's roster, 2005 to be exact, has become a huge fan favorite. I mean, look at YouTubers like Demigod, who absolutely love this guy.
Red Hood is still waiting on his solo run. Would you care to give him one?
This movie is probably what introduced this character to audiences to begin with. So in 2010, Under the Red Hood was adapted into animation under the DC Original Animation series. And before I get started, I know that there was another adaptation in 2020 titled Death in the Family, but it's an interactive thing that walks the same path as the 2010 film, and I feel that comparing all of those branching paths to the book would be one big rigmarole. Maybe someday as a collab or something like that, but for now, let's begin. The book actually opens in medias res, with Batman and Red Hood fighting on a rooftop near the end of the story and then unmasking, which is supposed to build up tension and suspense, but I kind of understand why the movie doesn't follow it. Instead, the movie opens with Jason Todd, aka the Second Robin, tied up in a warehouse being beaten with a crowbar by the Joker, intermixed with Batman racing through the city on his motorcycle and Ra's al Ghul in his palace. Joker continues to beat and taunt him before leaving him in the warehouse, asking him to say hello to the big man.
And hey, please tell the big man I said hello.
Robin struggles to his feet, trying to get to the door until the building explodes right as Batman gets there. He digs through the rubble and finds the body, and then that cuts to the opening credits. It's a really good scene. It sets the tone and establishes the key characters in the story. I'm not saying the comics opening is bad by any means. It also generates plenty of mystery by showing Red Hood rip off Batman's cowl and then leaving his identity ambiguous. The next scene shows a gang meeting between Gotham City's drug dealers. They give exposition about the status of the city and the power dynamic that's currently at play. You see, this isn't an Elseworlds or side story like some of the other stuff I've covered. Rather, it's a story arc that happens in the middle of an ongoing series, and the events of that series help set the stage for what happens here. What you need to know is that Gotham's underworld is currently being ruled by the crime lord Roman Sionis, also known as the Black Mask, and Batman's at a bit of a low point with one of his sidekicks, the Spoiler, being dead, and the gear manufacturing section of Wayne Enterprises being bought out by foreign businesses. But the movie doesn't really acknowledge any of that stuff. Anyways, at this meeting, the gangsters are all accusing the others of arranging the meeting until a voice calls out from the shadows above. Out steps the Red Hood, who reveals that he arranged the meeting and threatens the gang to work for him instead of Black Mask, giving him 40% of profits and not selling drugs to children. Pretty stand-up guy, if you ask me. To further encourage the gang to join him, he throws down a bag, revealing the heads of all of their lieutenants, and in both the book and the movie, he delivers a sick line.
That took me 2 hours. You want to see what I can get done in a whole evening?
This whole scene is pretty identical between the book and the movie and serves as a great introduction to the Red Hood and his energy that he'll continue to have until the end. The comic then has another scene of Black Mask himself hiring Mr. Freeze to be his muscle. I'm just gonna come out and say it here, I am not a fan of Mr. Freeze in this story. He doesn't really have a good reason to be here beyond being a henchman for Black Mask, but I've never really seen him as the kind of villain to work for anyone else. If he ever does, he's either being blackmailed or using them as a means to an end for his wife, but here, Mask offers him a job as hired muscle and he just accepts. To be fair, I don't know if there was a continuity reset or something that caused him to be this way, but I just think he could have been used better. The movie actually cuts him out entirely, which ties to a big point that I'll mention later. The next scene in both the movie and book shows some criminals running a weapons shipment for Black Mask before being caught by Batman and Nightwing. The book sees them avoiding the blast from a bomb and then chasing the Red Hood across some rooftops and then ending up in a warehouse to fight off against the superpower copying android Amazo, who you might recognize from Justice League. The movie instead changes this to the crate that contained the bomb instead holding Amazo, who breaks out and fights the duo immediately. In both mediums, the fight between these three is awesome. Amazo can copy the powers of all the Justice League members, but even with all of those abilities, Batman and Nightwing both outsmart and destroy him. The comic has some cool looking panels and the movie has some great choreography. The movie even keeps the chase with Red Hood, with him killing off the henchmen that were about to give him up. The two follow him across the rooftops until they reach the Ace Chemicals factory. There's a flashback to the original Red Hood falling into the acid vats before Red Hood now taunts Batman and blows up the factory, throwing them off his trail. The chase is a great scene, it's got some great animation and set pieces, and it actually cuts out an entire extra sequence from the book. The sequence in question sees the Red Hood stealing a giant supply of kryptonite from Black Mask, causing the two of them to have an admittedly funny negotiation over the phone. Then the two parties meet in a warehouse where Mr. Freeze and his lackeys try to win him over with a fake bribe that almost immediately gets blown. Nice going. They begin fighting until Batman and Nightwing arrive on the scene. All three groups start throwing hands until Mr. Freeze just decides to leave pretty unceremoniously. This leaves Batman and Nightwing to chase down the Hood. Batman fires a grappling hook at the Hood's leg, but he quickly cuts the rope and escapes. It's a cool little sequence. I think the idea of a kryptonite heist is pretty interesting and would lend itself well to a Suicide Squad comic or something like that, but I still get why the movie cut this along with all of the Mr. Freeze stuff. Back to the movie, after the chase at Ace Chemicals, Batman and Nightwing head to Arkham Asylum to interrogate the Joker. They ask him questions regarding the Red Hood, because if you didn't know, the original Red Hood was the Joker. That flashback in Ace Chemicals is actually how he got his bleached skin and green hair. He claims to know nothing, so it's back to the drawing board.
When I wore that number, it was classy. More flashy maitre d' than motorcycle fetish. Oh, these kids today.
Meanwhile, Black Mask, enraged by the takeover of his organization, sets his sights on taking down the Red Hood. At his next weapons shipment, Red Hood arrives and takes out all of the henchmen and is about to take off in their helicopter, only to be stopped yet again by Batman and Nightwing. They begin another chase, and this is where the movie does the knife-cutting grappling hook thing.
He's very good.
The three all end up in a train station, where Red Hood says that Batman hasn't lost his touch before he escapes.
You haven't lost your touch!
The duo goes back to the Batcave, where Batman sends Nightwing back home. He goes over the footage from the chase, and he analyzes the Red Hood's final words, and he discovers what he fully said.
You haven't lost your touch, bro!
So this naturally comes as a massive shock to Batman and has a flashback to the time when Jason Todd's Robin fought by his side, and we see the dynamic duo take on the Riddler, and Robin performs some of the same maneuvers that Red Hood has been using. I know the movie and comic have been differing quite a bit so far, but it's gonna keep going for a little while longer. First of all, the flashback with Jason Todd's Robin has Captain Boomerang as the villain instead of the Riddler, which is a funny little detail. After this, the comic sees Batman traveling around and talking to a bunch of different characters about coming back from the dead, and all of these feel kind of random. I could understand reaching out to maybe one of these people. Zatanna makes the most sense to me, but him running around asking her, Jason Blood, Green Arrow, and Superman all the same question just to get the same answer feels like the story is a bit bloated in this part, especially when you see how the movie does it. At the same time, a fellow Gotham vigilante named Onyx is eavesdropping on some drug dealers when none other than Red Hood appears and joins her. He teases her a bit before she begrudgingly joins him in fighting the thugs. They're backed into a corner for a moment before Red Hood pulls a minigun out of the shadows and kills them all. Onyx protests this, but gets pinned to a crate with a knife and gets talked down until Batman arrives in the Batplane to rescue her. He pursues the Red Hood and the two end up dueling in the alleyway, which brings us full circle to that beginning bit where the two unmask, and it's revealed that the Red Hood was actually Jason Todd all along. He survived his death at the hands of the Joker and has returned to wipe out crime in Gotham without mercy. It's genuinely a pretty shocking reveal. I mean, I already knew about it because I saw the movie like 10 years ago or something, but it's still pretty great. I still think the movie handles it better, but I'll explain that later. Batman then retreats to the manor, where he digs up Jason's grave, only to find that he was never in the coffin to begin with. Shifting back to the movie, we're still at the scene where Batman finds out Red Hood knows his name. Right after that, Black Mask lures out the Red Hood and sends in assassins called the Hand of Four, and he's about to be taken out until Batman appears and helps fight them off.
What the hell took you so long?
Shut up and fight.
The duo successfully subdues 3 of them, but Red Hood kills the 4th, much to Batman's dismay. The two have an argument about Gotham's crime and why Red Hood is doing what he's doing before he leaves abruptly. Batman takes some of his blood and runs tests on it back in the cave, only to discover that it belongs to none other than Jason Todd. In disbelief, Bruce digs up Jason's grave and inspects the body inside, only to realize that it's a fake. He then travels to the palace of Ra's al Ghul and questions him on his involvement because he's the reason he couldn't get to Robin in time when the Joker killed him. Ra's, in a very well-acted segment, explains that he had hired the Joker just to be a distraction while he ran a drug operation, but, against his wishes, Joker went too far by kidnapping Jason, beating him, and killing him in the warehouse in Bosnia.
He murdered the boy. That was not by design.
Feeling remorseful, he stole Jason's body and brought it to the Lazarus Pit, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a magical pool that can rejuvenate you, basically the Fountain of Youth. While it's mainly been used by Ra's to keep himself young, well, I mean, as young as this, he tried using it to resurrect Jason, and he was successful, but his mind was fractured and he was little more than a raving lunatic. He escaped from the Lazarus chamber and wasn't heard from again. I really like this explanation, and in general, this whole characterization for Ra's. I don't know about anyone else, but my favorite thing about Ra's is that he truly respects Batman. They spent a lot of time together when Bruce was in training, so much so that he wanted him as a successor for the League of Assassins. He never revealed his secret identity to the public, and the way that he refers to Batman as detective really sells that he sees him as an equal, or something close.
Detective, proud of you.
With this information, Bruce heads back to Gotham. Now back to the comic, Red Hood fires a rocket straight into Black Mask's office, which he is able to survive, and after regrouping with his men in a nearby alleyway, he's approached by Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke,
Nah, I'm pretty sure you're Deadpool. Look into the camera and say something inappropriate.
who offers him help from the Secret Society of Supervillains. That's a name. Feeling desperate, he accepts, so Slade reinforces him with the Hyena and Captain...
Nazis.
Reasonably, Black Mask is appalled by the A-list bad guys he's been given, but Slade assures him that it'll be fine. Red Hood eventually arrives to face off against these whack jobs and is actually getting overpowered until Batman enters the fray. Afterward, the villains are backed up by Count Vertigo, an illusionist, but with some cunning and dirty tactics, the two are able to defeat them, though they have a disagreement over Jason killing Captain Yahtzee.
Cheers to Red Hood.
As you can see, the comic and movie are currently treading similar ground, but there's still plenty of differences, and I'll cover all of that at the end. Back to the movie, Jason firing the rocket at Mask's office happens after the assassin fight, and barely surviving the attack, Black Mask does an act of ultimate desperation, breaking into Arkham Asylum and asking Joker to kill the Red Hood.
I'm going to need something to wear.
After this, Joker pulls an ex-Benedict and kidnaps Black Mask, his assistant, and all of his remaining loyalists, and puts them in a truck parked on a bridge. He begins filling it with gasoline until Red Hood arrives, and the two have a rather entertaining back and forth.
You know, I used to wear an outfit a lot like that. Mine was more flashy maitre d' than motorcycle fetish.
Then Joker drops a lighter into the truck. Thankfully, Batman flies in with the Batplane and blasts down fire retardant, but by the time he gets there on foot, both the Hood and Joker are gone. We're approaching the end here, so I'm just gonna get the comic up to this point and then discuss it. Following the showdown with the Society of Supervillains, Red Hood forces Sionis to kill all of his remaining henchmen, which enrages him to the point that he tries to take the Red Hood head-on. This fight is pretty scrappy, but the best part is Sionis' dialogue. He's watched parts of his empire get destroyed or turned against him, and he's been pushed to such an extreme that he's basically lost it. I don't know much about Black Mask outside of this story, but I'd say he's utilized pretty well. Batman arrives to see the Black Mask kill Red Hood, only for it to be revealed that it was a decoy. Meanwhile, Alfred then receives a package in the mail, opening it to find a lock of the Joker's hair. Batman then heads off to find Jason and Joker and end the conflict. Now we're in the endgame, guys, home stretch. Batman arrives in Crime Alley and is face to face with Jason. The two begin their fight, and I gotta say, it's really well done. In the movie, this is where the both of them unmask, and the fight just continues, but in the comic, Bloodhaven gets nuked. Yeah, you know how I kind of stopped mentioning Nightwing earlier in this video? He gets written out halfway through the story and sent back to Bloodhaven, and suddenly Slimer from Ghostbusters over here just blows up. This is so random, and I genuinely don't know why it's here. The fight continues until the two end up in a rundown house, and then begin talking. Batman expresses his regret for not being able to save Jason, who says this.
Bruce, I forgive you for not saving me. But why? Why on God's earth is he still alive?
He begins laying into Batman, saying that he can't forgive him for not killing the Joker, and that leaving him alive will only continue to get more innocent people killed. And in response, Batman gives one of his best monologues in any Batman story.
All I've ever wanted to do is kill him. A day doesn't go by when I don't think about subjecting him to every horrendous torture he's dealt out to others, and then end him. If I allow myself to go down into that place, I'll never come back.
I love this scene. In both versions, it's such a powerful moment that pays off for all the build-up throughout the story. The movie built to it naturally across its runtime, with Joker being a looming presence, and the comic has been a bit all over the place, and Joker wasn't really involved much, but still. The core of this story comes down to these three and their actions. Jason puts a gun to Joker's head and throws another to Batman, telling him that if he wants Joker to live, he has to shoot him right in the face. He protests, but then throws a batarang into the gun, disarming Jason, who then sets the building to self-destruct.
Don't spoil it! This is better! I'm the only one who's gonna get what he wants tonight!
He grabs Jason and makes a mad dash for the window before the building explodes. Resurfacing above the rubble, Batman searches for Jason, but to no avail, and the story ends with one last flashback to Jason's time as Robin. A wholesome memory.
This is the best day of my life.
Whew, that was a pretty crazy story, both versions, so let's break it down. The differences between the movie and the book range from light to pretty drastic. There's things like Nightwing's broken leg or the first Robin flashback, which are fine and don't mess with the narrative, but then there's drastic stuff like the other DC heroes and the rearranging of certain scenes. In my opinion though, the changes only make the story more cohesive. Even the things they add, like the death in the family opener, help put more focus on Joker, which I think is important and helps back up what I said earlier. My favorite change, though, might be the streamlining of Jason's revival. I mentioned earlier in the movie that Ra's al Ghul resurrected him with a Lazarus pit, but the comic does something similar, but in a much more confusing way. During one of DC's continuity-changing events, Jason was revived, awakening in his coffin. Upon digging out, he wanders around Gotham in a half-dead stupor before being taken by the League of Assassins. Ra's wants to get rid of him, but his daughter Talia brings him to the Lazarus pit, throwing him in, which gives him his memories back. I get that these are comics and stuff gets convoluted, but for the sake of the movie, I perfectly understand the movie removing the timeline stuff. Getting into the movie's technical side, the animation is really solid. It's got a good style, all the characters have some good designs, and everything is pretty fluid and detailed. The voice cast is also really good. Batman here is voiced by Bruce Greenwood, who does a great job conveying emotion. Batman has a lot of emotional moments here, and he delivers all of his lines very convincingly.
You know, we went through a bunch of... she took me through a bunch of kind of emotional paces to find where she thought was accurate.
Neil Patrick Harris, who is last seen on this series as the Flash in New Frontier, plays Nightwing. He's not around very long, but when he is, he sounds great and in character.
I'm saying that our boy here has some skills. He's been trained, and trained well.
Other highlights include Phil Lamar and Kevin Michael Richardson as assorted henchmen. Fred Tatasciore plays Amazo, which is pretty nice. Wade Williams was hilarious as the Black Mask. Jason Isaacs surprisingly does a great Ra's al Ghul. I had just seen his character in the third season of Marvel What If prior to writing this, so it was cool to see him in something better. John DiMaggio did a really cool take on the Joker. He never gets too zany, but the story never quite calls for that, and instead his voice is more ominous and sarcastic.
I can't believe you got him! You expert rootin' tootin' eagle-eyed goth-loving marksman!
He nailed Joker as a supporting side character, but I would honestly love to see a Batman project where he takes center stage. But of course, we have to talk about Jensen Ackles, who previously voiced Batman in Long Halloween Part 1 and 2, playing Jason Todd in the standout role. Troy Baker did a pretty solid Jason in Arkham Knight, but this is just on another level. His delivery is a mixture of sarcasm and rawness, which makes for a great performance as the movie's titular villain.
There's easier ways to kill yourself! Yeah, like yelling at the guy who's holding the AK-47.
Hats off to Jensen because he shines in anything superhero related. So, in closing, we have a first for this series where I would honestly recommend the movie over the book. The movie is a well-made mystery with a great emotional core and good characters, while the book has parts of that but feels kind of bloated by the extra DC characters that don't really add anything. I don't think it's bad for characters in this universe to run into each other because superhero franchises have armies of characters spanning multiple worlds, but for this story, I didn't think any of that was necessary. So yeah, read the book if you feel like it, but I'd say the movie is a more well-woven experience. But anyways, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. Be sure to like and subscribe to see more like it. Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, and I'll see you nerds later.
Are you sure this will work?
I have no idea!
Sylvia White ain't nothing but a holiday. Sylvia White ain't nothing but a mistake. Sylvia White, I never